Thank you very, very much. And good evening to Lower 9. As introduced, my name is Ira Thomas. For those of you who may not be all that familiar with me, I am your current school board member for District 1. District 1 includes the Lower 9th Ward and most of New Orleans East. And I got elected to the school board back in 2008. And I ran for the seat on the school board because it was a very, very critical time for public education in the city of New Orleans. We all know about the history of the state taking over our public school system. There are some things that you didn't know that occurred at the time they took over our public school system. They took all of our assets and they left all of the liabilities. Back in 2005, to run for a seat on the school board, you needed about $75,000 to $100,000. After the training hit and took over the schools, in 2008, 5 members of the school board decided not to seek re-election. No one was willing to step to the plate. Why? There was no longer a $500 million annual budget, no contracts and all that stuff to give away. Our school system was in a crisis. Our school system was in academic crisis, it was in financial crisis. We saw the firing of over 7,000 school teachers and other employees. There was a high deficit and over nearly $500 million of legacy debt. And also during that time, and as we know, the school board was never number 1 or number 2 or even in the top 10 of anything. We were always at the bottom, even in our best of years. So it was a very critical time for education. And I decided to step to the plate. And guess what? It only cost me $15,000 to run for this seat back in 2008. Because nobody wanted it because it required a lot of work. It was time to go to work on the school board. We were in a rebuilding process. We had to rebuild public education in this city. So I ran for that seat and I won. There were 2 other candidates in the race. In January of 2009, when we took over, we were hit with a $13 million deficit. And they also told us about a $500 million of legacy debt that was still there, that the state did not take to do anything about it. And so we had to hit the ground running. And here's what we did. 4 years ago, we saw a $13 million annual deficit. This year, 4 years later, in each successive year leading to this year, we managed those deficits. That $500 million of legacy debt that was there lingering, here's what we did through some special financing, taking advantage of the low interest rates, and with permission from the legislature through some legislation, we were able to refinance down that debt that is now saving our taxpayers, you, nearly $28 million in the new payback period. Today, 4 years later, we are number one in the state in high school cohort graduation rate. That's something to applaud, ladies and gentlemen, because the Orleans Parish school system, as I said earlier, was never number 1 in anything. We're number 2 in overall school performance scores. Not only that, during the campaign when I ran, as I went door to door and asking our friends and neighbors, your relatives and friends for their vote and support in this race, I began to talk to some school teachers who were retired school teachers. Any retired school teachers in here today? One retired school teacher. Here's what they told me. It's the time when she runs for a seat on the school board, but we saw our monthly health care premiums more than double by $400. This lady's witness by $400. Huh? So am I. That's another retired school teacher. and say, well, if you can do anything to help bring some relief to us, can you make that a priority? And the more I heard that cry, then it began to resonate in my spirit. I didn't know how we were going to do it, but I made a campaign promise that we would. We would look into it and I would make it a priority. As a board, we did. And we were able, through legislation again, to reduce the monthly health care premium for our retired school teachers. In other words, to divide that $400. In other words, we put that $400 back in the pockets of retired school teachers. In other words, the Northeast Baptist School Board. We're building new schools all over the city of New Orleans. We're building 21st century state-of-the-art, energy efficient, and environment-friendly schools. And we are refurbishing and renovating many other schools. Here's something else I learned when I wanted to sit on the school board. That the lower ninth ward was left out of phase 1 of the master plan.
Oh, yes.
Now my opponent, who was in the race, is the lady who I succeeded on the board. She turned her back on the lower ninth ward. There was some $80 million of FEMA funding for schools that were damaged down here in the lower ninth ward. My opponent allowed those funds to be taken out of phase 1 of the master plan for the lower ninth ward and used in other areas of the master plan in other parts of the city. That was when I met Vanessa and I met Reverend Calhoun and many others who came to the forefront and as a new board member and asked me to work with them to find out where that money is, where it went, and also, if possible, to get it back reallocated for a school back in the lower ninth ward. Well, it took some doing. It wasn't easy. You guys, you all know, y'all dealt with the RSD on this, and those two halls that we had to deal with, Valley and Pastor, they were not easy people to work with. And so, promise after false promise after false promise, you were told you would get a new high school. We also brought in Senator Mary Andrews and many other elected officials who worked with us, and finally we were able to secure the money to build a new high school that's going on the Lawrence High School side. So what I'm saying to you tonight, we're number 1 in high school graduation. We're number 2 in school overall performance score. We are no longer in academic crisis. We have the number 1 bond rating in the city. That's better than the city of New Orleans, the Susan Water Board, the airport. Banks are now knocking our doors down to loan us money. Thank you. And so we've done all the things that we need to do on both sides of the district, academically as well as in managing the business of the board. So when I began this journey 4 years ago, my slogan then was, let's rebuild our public school system. Today I'm proud to say to you that we are well on our way to making that a reality, because we've managed the budget each budget year after year. We managed the legacy debt, and now the school system academically is doing great, and we're continuing to move in the right direction. I feel like I've done those things that I told you as a school board member I would work to do. In New Orleans East, for example, my opponent, she forgot about Lake Forest Charter School. They were trying to get property to build the new high school. Lake Forest Charter is one of the AA 5-star schools that have national recognition for academics. And all they wanted was for the school board to acquire property for them to build a new school. You know what the previous board told them? You find the property and you buy the property and we'll build a school number. When I became the board member, I said, no, enough is enough. So they decided, my own board members, that they were going to provide a site to Lake Forest that really wasn't conducive for that school. I had to fight with my own board members as the District 1 representative to say, no, that's not good enough. And we worked together with the parents and with Mardell early over at Lake Forest community, and secured $1.2 million to purchase the former site that was owned by Briggs and Stevens at Bright in Lake Forest. A 16-acre site for this school, not only to be built new, but also have room for further growth and expansion as we go down the line. So I'm standing here proudly tonight to say, I believe I represented you well. You know, they told me when I took this job as a school board member that it was a part-time job, because it doesn't pay anything. But this job really requires full-time attention. You know, I don't take it lightly when a parent calls me and say, you know, I have a problem at my child's school, can you assist? I pride myself on being accessible to parents and to school officials, you know, when there's a problem with schools in my district. But I've also extended myself well beyond my district and have helped school administrators in other districts throughout the city of New Orleans whenever I'm called for. And I'm saying to you tonight, to come back before you, asking for your support and re-electing me to this post because I've done the job. I've been accessible to my constituency, and you know, I carried that banner of making our school system the best that it can be. And we've worked together as a board, and I've worked as an individual to do things in my district. I think I've done a good job, and I've earned the right to come back to you, to ask you to look at my report card. Is it an A, B, C, D, or F report card? I think it's an A report card. I'm the student. You're the teachers. You tell me. But I need your support on November 6th. My number is number 8 on the ballot. There's still work to be done. And the last thing I want to tell you about is this. When I came on the board in 2009, one of the first questions I asked is, why don't we have a DBE program? DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. And for those of you who may not be familiar with it, you know, we're spending, we have spent, and when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, we would have spent nearly $2 billion in these new school and renovating the school and refurbishing the school projects. When I came to the board, I asked the question why we don't have a DBE program. And that DBE program is designed to include minority and women-owned businesses so that they can participate in the rebuilding process. So some of those dollars can stay within our communities. And I was told that we had one prior to Katrina, but the board just didn't act to move and to make a DBE program possible. Mrs. K, who was the District 2 representative, worked with me. She took the lead as the chairperson of the policy committee, and we worked, and it took us a while. It took us 3 years to do it. But I'm happy to stand here tonight before you and tell you that we now have a Disadvantaged Business Enterprise program back functioning in the Orleans Parish School Board that now Black-owned and minority and women-owned businesses will have an opportunity to participate in contracts, in building and construction contracts with Orleans Parish School Board. And the emphasis is on local. Policy says that these must be local businesses. And so we're proud of that accomplishment. And what does that mean? Millions of dollars into the hands of disadvantaged businesses to help with not just the building of our schools, but also promoting economic development in all of our communities throughout the city of New Orleans. So, you know, I'm proud of where we are. We have still some work to do. I've been endorsed in this campaign by Congressman Cedric Richmond, State Representative Western Bishop, by the AFL-CIO, and by the United Teachers of New Orleans. So I think they have a broad, very broad support, and then hopefully, finally, endorsed by you, the voters of Lower 9 and of New Orleans East. So at this point, if you have any questions at all, I'll be glad to answer.
Okay, thank you, Ira. I have one call from the audience, and we have some questions that we prepared to present to Mr. Thomas. But if anyone has any cards, any audience that you want to pose some questions to Mr. Thomas, please let us know. Raise your hand, and I'll send someone to come pick it up. But this is a card from the audience, and they're asking, what's the plan for schools in the area? There's a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, standing at the corner of my view, along before 7 a.m. The parent must have to work. So again, this is a kid that's being bussed out of the neighborhood because, as you know, King has the 500 student waiting list. So they're asking, what's the plan for, I guess, the elementary, because she's 8 or 9, she's in elementary school age.
Okay, and it's a very, very good question. And as I said from the very outset, you know, the state took over our school system. And when they did so, they took all of our assets and they left our liabilities. And what we've been trying to do as your elected school board is work through our elected officials through legislation in order to start that change of returning schools back to the Orleans Parish School Board. So that is an ongoing effort, and we will continue to work with our executive superintendent to charter schools for that very, very purpose. The concern about children standing at the bus stops is a concern of mine. Early in the morning and coming home late in the evening. And I think there are a number of things that we can do about it. But one thing that concerns me about that is that with the new systems of schools that we have, we've all but done away with neighborhood students. Children get on buses and they go, they travel on these buses every morning for as long as an hour and a half each way. So when I went to school, I walked to school for 12 years, every day. I walked to school because we went to neighborhood schools, and that don't exist anymore. So what do we do now that we know that our kids have to get on these buses and go all over the place? For one, you know, as neighbors, we got to be more concerned about each other and more concerned about our children. And step out of our doors in the morning as much as you can when we see our young people standing at the bus stop. You know, we have to take that village attitude and mentality again, you know, to be concerned about our children. Also, we pay taxes, so we have a police department. We have a right to say to our law enforcement leadership, listen, our kids are at the bus stop at early hours in the morning. I'm a retired New Orleans police lieutenant. So I understand how important that is. The police department does everything that it possibly can, you know, to ensure the safety of our babies who have to get on these buses until we can do some things as the decision makers along with the community to change this current situation.
Okay, we can't let you go too long on these answers.
All right.
Okay, so you got to answer real quick.
All right.
Okay, what will you do to help return Armstrong School to community control and work with the community voice on this? Real quick, real brief. Okay,
real quick, real brief. We know that one thing we were able to do for that Armstrong location is get legislation from that brewerage that restricted the RSD, the New Orleans Baptist School Board, from doing anything with that building because it does have some historical significance. And so I've worked with members here in the Lower 9th Ward to make that happen. So, and as you and I have talked about that, it takes funding. So we have to put that on the table. and try to find funding in order to renovate that school and get it back into use for an educational purpose. So I'm committed going forward, Vanessa, to finding the money and working with the community in order to make that happen.
All right. There are no GED classes on this side of the canal, classes this side of Canal Street. What are you doing to return?
The GED programs are now being not held at any of all these parish or RSD schools. You know, they're being held at right now they're Community College. I don't know if pre-Katrina we had a GED program down there. We did. Okay. And so while that's a good question, I haven't given any thought to it, but I tell you that's something that I think we can note of and be glad to look into.
All right. What are you doing to prevent Teach for America, high density, and low performing schools?
Well, I'm not doing anything to prevent Teach for America. The Cover School District has made a commitment to Teach for America to bring teachers into our community to teach our young people. We see and we know that there have been a number of problems with that process. So I'm not happy with the results. And the last part of your question was?
Teach for America, high density, low performance.
Yeah, I just was contacted by a couple of parents of students at Schaumburg Elementary. That's my district in New Orleans East. It's a D school, and it's a school that is in trouble. And we know that the RSD has plans closing that school down, turning it over to a charter. You know, and it's a direct-run school. It is a community school. As I mentioned to you earlier, you know, I'm committed to the idea of community schools. So I've already reached out to the leadership at the RSD and to sit down with the parents again, because you know we as parents are concerned about the plight of public education in the city. We have to really give them, that community, a voice as well with respect to the decisions that are going to be made about Schaumburg. What I've offered real quick is that for a long time, Reverend Cameron, you know, the two poles were very difficult to deal with. The leadership that's there now, you know, I've asked for an opportunity to sit down so that we can see, we can work out a partnership. It doesn't have to be an adversarial kind of a situation anymore, because all of these children are our children. And we have to be equally concerned about them. So yes, I am concerned about that. I've reached out to the RSD to try to save these schools, because what happens when the school shuts down, the children scatter. And we have more children standing at bus stops at 6 in the morning waiting for a bus to go to Algiers or some other part of the city to a school. You know, when we need to do everything that we can to keep those young people in that family of schools together so that community can continue to stay intact.
You also lose students in that process.
Absolutely. We lose many.
Okay, we're going to just pose one more question to you. Okay. What are you doing to prevent the name changes of schools in our area? What are you doing around that?
Well, the recovery school district again, you know, and I keep saying that because, you know, because of the act of the legislature, you know, they were given this authority to make those decisions, you know, and to be totally honest with you. There's very, very little, you know, that we can do about that. And we've addressed it, but because of the legal restraint around that legislation, there's very, very little, you know, that we can actually do to impact that. The best thing that we can do, we continue to do that, is when schools are renamed, you know, we meet with the officials at the RSD and we try to, you know, keep communication, keep dialogue open with them. you know, so that if the school name is going to be changed, and that the audience has a school board, you know, or the city or the community, you know,